to our session. I think that we have here like survivors of the day 3. You are very brave and strong. And our session is about the role of civil society and role of NGOs, academia in strengthening national evaluation systems. I think that it's impossible to have a national evaluation system embed only in the government or in the parliament, because it will be like a temple with one pillar. We need 3, 4, and much more pillars to have a stable, resilient, and sustainable construction. So I would like to give a floor first to, we will have one presentation in French. So if you don't speak French, please take translation devices. I would like to give a floor to Georgi Kldiashvili, the Executive Director of the Institute of Development of Freedom of Information in Georgia. He has more than 12 years of experience working locally and internationally on topics such as open and good governance, access to public information, anti-corruption policy, beneficial ownership transparency, money laundering, transparency and accountability, e-government, open data, public service and administration, SDGs, media and internet, democracy and civil society. He is historian by profession and conducted different academic activities on research of the history of the United States and Soviet Union. He holds degree in contemporary history and worked as professor of American Studies at the Institute of American Studies at Tbilisi State University. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Irina, for introduction. First of all, I would like to greet our participants and attendees from online who joined our webinar, and also the audience. It's my great pleasure to participate in this event in the very beautiful city of Torino, and I would like to deeply gratitude the organizers, especially UNDP, for inviting me and for this opportunity to share my observations about the role of civil society in the national evaluation systems. Well, the civil society is a very crucial partner in these regards, and I would like to speak just very little bit about the organization I represent. This is the Tbilisi, Georgia-based NGO, which works on the various fields. And thank you, Irina, for listing those of the topics that I personally and my organization is working on. And monitoring and public oversight over the work of the government is one of the key issues that my organization is working on. In general, actually, we aim to support the development of an informed and empowered society to foster democratic governance. This is the general topic, but in this regard, there are many dimensions that we are covering, including good governance, open governance, access to public information, fighting corruption, public administration, reform, SDGs, and in this regard, this is the most important that I want to emphasize, that with the support and with the in cooperation with the UNDP and Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA, recently we have worked on with the government administration of Georgia on the nationalization of the SDGs, as well as with the other development partners on the localization of SDGs. What means the role of civil society and the engagement of civil society in this process is that we, together with the other stakeholders like academia, local partners, work with the government to promote those of the major directions related to government strategies. It might be different, including anti-corruption strategies, SDG nationalization and localization process. It might be public administration reform, which is one of the large reforms that the government is implementing. And civil society is the key partner in this regard. But this partnership should be coming from the both sides. When you consider civil society as a partner, you should accept the criticism that independent civil society organizations might have towards the government. And also, what is the most important in this process, you should provide relevant information, because the expertise that is outside the government can be used quite effectively in the process. And this is what the role of civil society is, that we as professional NGOs provide information, we provide relevant expertise, and this can be used in the process of evaluation or whatever it is. So when we speak about the evaluation, the information that is gathered by the NGOs while they work on the various topics is relevant to the independent evaluators as well as for the government. And here comes the importance of the relevant data. This might be the open data information. This might be disaggregated information about the gender, etc., etc. So organizations like my organization, IDFI, is gathering various and analyzes various types of information. And this can be used with the government, by the government and different relevant stakeholders. So we are completely engaged in various working groups, in drafting various policy documents, including strategies and action plans. And at the same time, we provide monitoring of implementation of different strategies and action plans. So in these regards, I would like to say that together with academia, civil society is a very crucial partner. It's the principal partner, because we are focused not only about the monitoring, but also the effective implementation of strategies, effective implementation of various action plans. And we do the monitoring, but at the same time provide the evidence-based research, etc. So civil society should be considered as key partner. Once again, I would like to stress, in the process, both in the implementation as well as the evaluation. These are just very general observation I would like to share with you, but I'll be happy to go into details, and I'm pretty sure that my colleagues at the panel will further develop what I wanted to say, and then we'll have a very productive discussion as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. After the first presentation, I recognize that I did not present it myself. I present other people very good, but I forget about myself sometimes. I am Irina Kravchuk. I'm from Ukraine. I am co-founder of Ukrainian Evaluation Association. I'm also independent monitoring, evaluation, and learning consultant. I defended postdoc degree on evaluation of public policy in Ukraine, and maybe that's it. I would like to give the floor to our other distinguished panelist, Matudzi Amisi. Matudzi has extensive experience as a researcher and evaluator in government and public administration in South Africa. She is research associate at the Center for Learning and on Evaluation and Results, CLEAR, working to support African governments in development of national evaluation and monitoring systems. She also was part of the team who established the evaluation system in South Africa. She was working in the planning and monitoring unit, right? Yeah. And she was part of the team who developed the course on evidence-based policy making and implementation in Nelson Mandela School of Public governance at the University of Cape Town. And now she's also has a keen interest in monitored evaluation and evidence used in the violence prevention sector, focusing on what works to prevent violence against women, children, as well as gender responsive planning and budgeting. She's also chairperson of the not chairperson or former chairperson or founder of this is experience, chairperson of the South African Monitoring Evaluation Association. Yeah. Okay, so the floor is yours.
Sorry about that. Like, whenever you're asked to submit a bio, you don't think it's going to be read.
No. I would not. We have very great speakers, and I would like people to know about your experience, why you are here, because our panel present different perspectives. Perspective on the side of NGO, perspective of the VOPI, perspective of research, perspective on the side of people who were on both sides, like Matudzi in the government and being a consultant. I also had been working in the government in the past.
Thank you, Ariana. So I mean, we had a question to sort of contemplate, which is, how do we get civil society organizations, other stakeholders to be involved in NES, and what that looks like. And I think in contemplating that question, I sort of was thinking, what is a national evaluation system, and what is its function in a society? And if we think about it, a national evaluation system, it really is a knowledge generation, and at best, if it's working well, a knowledge brokering system within a country, right? It helps generate information that can be used to help government solve problems that they're facing. And so a national evaluation system is an enabler in policy dialogues and many other things. So when we're thinking about the participation of other stakeholders in the national evaluation system, that's sort of like where I'm wanting to anchor it, because I think sometimes when we're talking about national evaluation systems, we sort of dream too big about in terms of what we think a national evaluation system does in a society. And so I want to just sort of bring it at that level and then focus on that. And so I strongly believe that, and from the experience of kind of seeing it within government and then also kind of outside, that there's no way that we can talk about resilient national evaluation systems unless those systems are anchored and connected to the people who actually are engaged in development in those countries. And here I'm not just talking about public servants, because often we talk about public servants, but I'm thinking, even with civil society organizations, because they have a stake in national development. And if an NES is an enabler to solve problems, to lead to development, then we need to be really carefully thinking about what role those stakeholders are playing in the national evaluation system, in its configuration, but also in the carrying out of evaluation. And this is what I want to look at, those two functions. One is in the configuration of a national evaluation system. What role could civil society organization play, and how do we enable that? So firstly, if you look at all countries that are sort of building national evaluation systems, that are talking about institutionalization, they're trying to be systematic in their way that they're approaching evaluations, they're setting up some form of intersectoral coordination mechanisms to try and bring different stakeholders together. And those mechanisms can be very helpful at bringing together NGOs and academia to kind of help the country think about the evaluation function and how it's being located within policy. And this is where organization like Georgie's organization can be a very powerful ally in really helping think about evaluation as a function, as a practice. And so when I think about even back in South Africa, even the role of Samia, and I know that Kasim is going to be talking about VOPIs, the role of Samia in helping the government to think about how do you define standards? What are the capacities that you need to have to be able to roll out a national evaluations system, but also in helping do like some institutional analysis of what's going on in the country, what's going on with universities, and what kind of courses are being taught was actually quite pivotal in how the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation was able to sort of think about its own capacity needs, but also work with other partners to build the capacity of public servants that was needed to roll out the system. And up to today, Samia, South African Monitoring and Evaluation Association, and the DPME enjoy a very close relationship where you have officials from the DPME that sits on the board of the VOPI, and really help support each other in their work. And I know that there's concerns about how a powerful agency like the State Department can over-dominate, civil society organization like the VOPs. But nonetheless, it's a very important relationship in kind of bringing civil society organization voice in the NES. But also we need to be thinking about the other agencies, right? Not just the VOPI, other civil society organizations that are working in that space. The second level of involvement, it's really at a point when evaluation is being carried out. And here I'm talking about when, when we are putting out when we're wanting to evaluate a program, when we're wanting to evaluate policies, how do we bring civil society organization to be, or representatives to be part of that process? And what we experimented with was, using people from civil society as, for example, as peer reviewers, or sometimes as people who sit on our steering committees to help us bring that perspective from community level into an evaluation when it's being implemented. And we found that that's an area where they add such great value. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to tell you an example of an evaluation that we did. It's a bit old now. It was done in like 2016. But we were evaluating how South African government was responding to gender-based violence, and it's a big problem in South Africa. But it's also a problem which is responded to mainly by civil society organizations, a lot of NGOs that are implementing programs in communities. And so even at the point when we were designing terms of reference, we needed to get the perspective of the NGOs that are implementing services to understand what are some of the critical questions that needs to be considered for this evaluation. And also when the evaluation was completed, we realized that it's really important to make sure that it's inserted in the spaces where civil society organizations are meeting each other, where they're engaging, where they're dialoguing. And most of those spaces actually have a continuity, which evaluation steering committees don't have, because we set up evaluation steering committees for a purpose, and then when the evaluation is done, we close it. But if an NGO if a civil society movement has got a network which are meeting twice a year and they're engaging on the topic, it's such an important space to make sure that the evaluation is located in there. And I'm going to tell you an anecdote, and I was telling someone that I love anecdotes to kind of illustrate what I mean. So when we were doing the evaluations, we had we had a peer reviewers who were from civil society organization. And when we finished the evaluation, I suddenly got an invitation to come and present this evaluation at this network of NGOs, which I didn't know before. I didn't even know that it existed. And when I got there to present the evaluation, I wanted to understand, obviously, like, how did we get invited to this network? And it turned out that our peer reviewer had told the person who chairs that network that government had just completed this evaluation, and you might want to get them to present it. And once we presented it at that forum, they realized that what we had found in the evaluation was something that they had been seeing, but they didn't put words to it, which was that South African government was putting a lot more money in policing than it was in prevention programs. So then they took part of those findings, put it in a policy brief, which has a far much wider reach than the government publication has, and generated a conversation about how do we prevent violence in South Africa. And that conversation is still continuing today through a forum called the Violence Prevention Forum. But also another peer reviewer, who was also a civil society representative, had also kind of told other colleagues of hers that, well, this evaluation is happening, and what we have found is that there's a problem in how we define services for survivors of violence. And so she mobilized resources through the EU to fund a project to help figure out how do you do that? How do you package services? So as you can see, that involvement of civil society organization in the evaluation was a catalyst to making sure that the evaluation was useful, and then also that it was used. And if we didn't create the space for them to participate in the evaluation, we probably would have never known about these, these spaces, and we would have never really engaged with them. I'm going to conclude with just like what I think this tells us. So firstly, we must not forget that the value of civil society organization participation in NES is not always apparent to those who are either running the NES or setting up systems, right? Because we're usually thinking about the state and building the state capacity. And so you have to build in incentives to encourage that participation. And one of the ways is making sure that it's in the policies, it's in the guidelines, because, mostly from a state perspective, if it's not in a policy, if it's not prescribed, it's not something that people would do intuitively. Secondly, involving civil society organizations or their voice in evaluation systems requires certain skills. And the skills are not your technical skills around evaluation, but it's the skills of convening people, of bringing people together, showing value, creating a space for them to actually add value to the evaluation or to the national evaluation system. Those skills are not always easy to build, but nonetheless are important if we really want to have a genuine participation of civil society organizations in the NES. And then lastly, we must also not think that there's, to make that participation happen, the spaces must always be created by government. Because what tends to happen is that, and this is, to all the people who are in government, this is not I'm sure you've experienced it, but when the state creates spaces, they're often hierarchical, right? They're chaired by somebody because they're senior, and it's very difficult to create a space for real dialogue and real conversation. They're very hierarchical. But you can take stuff that's happening within the NES and locate it in what's happening outside. And on that note, I think I'm gonna stop, and then I'm gonna hand over back to Irian.
Thank you very much. Yeah, really, the civil society should have like oversight over, because me, for example, as a former civil servant, I would tell that we were doing very good. Like usually we are inclined to assess we did a hard job, and it's very difficult to have like objective. Okay, it's impossible to have fully objective. It's very difficult to have objective point of view on the policies which we develop. If it's internal evaluation or if it's even commissioned by the government, yeah, we need external point of view for sure. And I would like to give now the floor to our another expert, to Mamadou Coulibaly. He's a socio-economist of development, expert and trainer on planning, budgeting, evaluation, sustainable development and climate change, production of science, technology, and innovation data. He is also a doctor of science in doctor in social sciences of development, and also permanent secretary of the Ivorian Monitoring and Evaluation Network. Please use. He will do presentation in French. Do you want to help? Yes. Can I ask the help? David is on. Ah, that's right.
Monsieur, bonsoir. Comme elle a si bien dit, je suis Dr Coulibaly Mamadou, je suis socio-économiste, anthropologue de développement. Par ailleurs, secrétaire permanent du réseau ivoirien de suivi et d'évaluation. Il est marqué que je suis vice-président du réseau francophone d'évaluation. Effectivement, j'ai été vice-président du réseau francophone d'évaluation parce que c'était un mandat de 2 ans, renouvelable une fois. J'ai été vice-président pendant 2 ans. J'ai été renouvelé à Ouaga. J'ai fait encore 2 ans. Et là, je suis actuellement membre simple du réseau ivoirien de évaluation francophone. Merci bien. Je voudrais, bien avant de commencer, dire quand même merci à une structure qui est le PNUD, grâce à qui je suis là aujourd'hui, et aussi président de mon réseau, qui a bien voulu que je le représente là cet après-midi, le professeur Adama Diawara, qui est par ailleurs le ministre de l'Enseignement supérieur et de la recherche scientifique de l'État de Côte d'Ivoire. Et je voudrais aussi dire merci au ministre du Plan, et représenté ici par M. Ndia Youssouf, qui est le directeur du suivi-évaluation, qui organise vraiment, comme je le disais, la vie des associations volontaires au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire pour ce qui est de la promotion de l'évaluation. J'ai présenté mon thème sous forme de question. Quel système national d'évaluation au service du développement durable? Dans un premier temps, je parle de charte graphique et acteurs. De quoi s'agit-il? Une charte graphique d'un système national d'évaluation résilient au service du développement durable. Il faut comprendre par là qu'un système national d'évaluation résilient au service du développement durable est axé sur 4 choses. 1, une vision d'abord, une volonté politique des gouvernants pour la culture de l'évaluation, c'est-à-dire des résultats. 2, un environnement qui s'adapte, c'est-à-dire un environnement juridique fort, adapté sur un système d'évaluation de ces politiques-là. 3, des acteurs eux-mêmes qui soient très engagés. La société civile fait partie de ces acteurs engagés. Ensuite, la capacité de ces acteurs-là doit être permanemment renforcée de telle sorte qu'elle soit toujours là pour accompagner de façon positive la dynamique dans laquelle s'inscrit l'État en question. Au niveau de ce système, j'ai dénombré 6 acteurs clés, à savoir les structures de coordination, les structures consultatives et de contrôle, les structures associées au niveau central, les structures de mise en œuvre de l'évaluation au niveau sectoriel, les structures au niveau décentralisé et déconcentré, et enfin, les autres parties prenantes non étatiques. Au niveau des structures de coordination, on a le ministère du Plan, bien sûr, qui porte la question de l'évaluation chez nous en Côte d'Ivoire. Et dans certains pays, c'est le ministère de l'économie, et dans d'autres pays encore, c'est même la présidence, et souvent c'est la primature. Donc, tout dépend de l'ancrage institutionnel que le pays aura choisi. Parmi les structures consultatives et de contrôle, on a le Parlement, parce que le Parlement porte l'évaluation chez nous. Il y a eu une présentation ce matin où il est dit que nous avons la loi sur l'évaluation en Côte d'Ivoire depuis 2016. Et aujourd'hui, nous sommes dans l'opérationnalisation de cette loi. On a l'inspection générale d'État. Ensuite, nous avons la Cour des comptes et la haute autorité à la bonne gouvernance qui s'occupe des questions de corruption, surtout aujourd'hui. Au niveau des structures associées au niveau central, nous avons l'appareil qui produit les statistiques, c'est-à-dire l'Institut national de la statistique, ça doit être pareil dans tous les États. Ensuite, on a la direction de la planification et de la direction de la programmation des investissements publics. Tout dépend de la Constitution, comment c'est formalisé au niveau de chaque État. Voilà, je prends le cas du Sénégal, c'est porté par la présidente de façon directe. Chez nous, il y a un ministère qui est là, qui travaille dans ce sens fortement. Ensuite, au niveau des autres structures de mise en œuvre, je vais parler des structures, c'est-à-dire sectorielles, les sous-directions, les directions et autres en charge de la planification, la mise en œuvre du plan national de développement et son suivi surtout et son évaluation à mi-parcours puisque nous disposons d'une politique nationale d'évaluation maintenant. Au niveau des décentralisés, déconcentrés, on a les structures déconcentrées, les structures territoriales et ensuite, au niveau des autres parties prenantes, on a les organisations de la société civile qui est l'objet de notre présentation ici ce soir. On a le secteur privé lui-même, on a les universités et les centres de formation, et ensuite, on a les partenaires techniques financiers, eux qui accompagnent tout ce système-là, surtout les actions, les initiatives de la société civile. Au niveau du ministère du Plan, il faut dire que je vais essayer de ressortir tout simplement quelques grandes actions que ces structures-là, que j'ai appelées hautes parties prenantes, devraient faire pour pouvoir mieux accompagner l'action. Le ministère du Plan et du Développement doit pouvoir être capable de promouvoir la pratique évaluative et faire respecter les normes, piloter, définir les priorités en matière d'évaluation, d'impact des politiques et programmes et émettre des avis sur la méthodologie existante. Ensuite, au niveau du Parlement, il faut dire que c'est l'instance qui décide des évaluations à mener en fonction des informations transmises par le ministère du Plan. C'est l'instance aussi qui conduit les missions conjointes en matière d'évaluation. Le Parlement est aussi l'instance qui élabore les rapports publics d'évaluation et émet, le cas échéant, des recommandations au gouvernement à l'effet de mieux orienter les interventions publiques. Au niveau de l'inspection générale d'État, on a la planification et la conduite des missions d'évaluation des performances surtout, ou d'impact des politiques publiques dans les administrations et les entreprises publiques. Et l'IGE, que nous appelons encore inspection générale d'État, apprécie la qualité et la sincérité des rapports de synthèse des évaluations internes au niveau sectoriel et transmet ces synthèses-là d'évaluation à la Cour des comptes. Et la Cour des comptes reçoit, traite ces synthèses-là, fait des observations, assiste le Parlement dans la conduite de l'évaluation des politiques publiques, formule des recommandations à l'endroit des gouvernants afin de mieux orienter l'action publique et présente au président de la République et au Parlement les rapports des missions d'évaluation. On a aussi ce que nous appelons l'Institut national de la statistique, qui se retrouve être une structure qui accompagne dans la production des statistiques. On a les structures décentralisées, c'est-à-dire sectorielles, qui accompagnent la production et le suivi au niveau sous-sectoriel. On a les structures de concentrés qui participent à la mobilisation des acteurs locaux et qui servent aussi des passerelles entre les structures au niveau sectoriel et les autres acteurs du développement local. Ensuite, on a les organisations de la société civile qui participent à la promotion, de l'évaluation et au contrôle des politiques, programmes à travers des actions, des débats citoyens et la structure de l'évaluation. Et le secteur privé qui s'implique dans le déroulement des évaluations et participe à leur conduite. Les universités et centres de formation qui aussi fait partie des autres parties prenantes comme les organisations de la société civile qui développent et administrent les programmes diplômants et de formation en évaluation, qui conduisent les recherches sur la pratique évaluative et publient les articles scientifiques et les autres guides au niveau de l'évaluation et qui initient et favorisent aussi la réflexion sur la professionnalisation du métier de l'évaluateur. Et les PTF qui contribuent bien sûr à l'amélioration de la qualité de ces évaluations en participant au comité de pilotage d'évaluation des projets de développement et aident à la dissémination des résultats au sein des groupes. À la fin de cette présentation, je voulais présenter le message clé que nous avons pu élaborer et envoyer dans le cadre de cette session 2022 du NEC. Il s'agit de considérer l'évaluation comme le socle, comme le support, comme le berger, le guide de toute action de développement si nous voulons vraiment réussir ce développement-là. Sans évaluation, aucune planification n'a de sens. Sans évaluation, aucune programmation, aucune stratégie ne peut aboutir. Aujourd'hui, nous aspirons tous en 2030 au développement durable à travers les différents objectifs. Et cela ne peut se faire que si on a une bonne évaluation avec une bonne société civile forte pour accompagner l'action de l'État. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mamadou, for great presentation. I would like to give to Qasim El Sadiq. He was evaluation practitioner and consultant. He's doing his personal consultancy, 360 Consulting. He's manager partner there. He also was engaged in the regional and global platform to evaluate the 2030 agenda as practitioner, researcher, and panelist. He has been at the forefront of the evaluation community, co-founder of Eval CDG Network, Lebanese Evaluation Association, and also MENA Evaluation Network. And he's also serving as at the ALNAP advisory group to revise the DAG criteria. He will speak about his research of WOPIS, about the capacity development, because WOPIS, it's one of the, I think, main players in the strengthening national evaluation system. But what challenges do they have? What is the way out?
Thank you, Irina. Thank you, esteemed colleague and panelist, and thanks for the crowd. Allow me to a bit be provocative in the provide a self-criticism of basically what we claim doing within the evaluation community. Yes, I do understand and I do acknowledge the fact that there are a lot of external factors and external determinants that would affect the use and the uptake of the evaluation. But again, let me pick up on where our colleagues Mamadou started, VOPES, and I hate the term. I would love to probably replace it with a better acronym that is National Evaluation Organizations, probably, as a key player in the NEC or NES. And pick up on Matutsi's saying that the role of VOPES or the National Evaluation Associations or organizations might not be that apparent. And the question is, why are they not apparent? While, let me just use it. While government have increasingly, and we've seen it, acknowledged the role of evaluation in national development processes, but their acknowledgement of the role of those VOPES or national evaluation associations and organizations hasn't been matching. And the reason I'm trying to understand that observation and that the reason behind it. In doing so, I did a couple of series of consultations, and by no means I claim that the findings would be representative or can be generalized all over the place, all over the globe, but nevertheless, they speak truth to some parts of the world, and I can speak to the MENA region, to some parts of the African continent, and a bit on the Asian continent too. And we've seen a bit of shift in the role of the VOPES, moving from the conventional role of capacity building, etc., into more of assuming a role in shaping or establishing national evaluation system by facilitating, by being knowledge brokers, probably. And to fulfill that role, there are a couple of, prerequisites, one of which is strong institutional capacity. Another one is an enhanced professional set of competencies and skills, and definitely enabling environment that are obviously supported by or set by the government. And the question or the hypothesis I'm starting from is, if we want to answer the question, if we want our systems to be resilient, well, the elements of the system to some extent need to be resilient. And a key element of that system is those VOPES whom some of us here in this room represent. So for the national evaluation organizations or the VOPES to be resilient, they should address their internal tensions and external challenges. Well, we've all dwelled too much on the external challenges. Let me focus a bit on the internal tensions. And to overcome, obviously we need to be cognizant and reflective in self-critiquing basically what those tensions are all about. And allow me to probably pick up on 3 of them. At the same time, while they are tensions that might hinder the progress or the work or the achievement of the National Evaluation Organization, I can see a lot of opportunity in them if we reflect on them and if we try to overcome or at least address them. It's a tension around the format of the VOPES, and the format that stems from this acronym VOPE, and the capacity to deliver the mission. And the tension is with regard to being qualified as voluntary organizations, yet dreaming and shooting for high aspirations that would require a lot of resources, a lot of being a human resource and what have you. And probably one of the opportunities here is to relook at the governance structures of many of our VOPES or of our national evaluation organizations, with a balancing of with a meaningful balance between what voluntary participation is all about at the level of the board, probably, that can push the mandate and the mission forward at the level of the executive arm or probably the secretariat. Another level of tension is the tension between I mean, the crowd of people that make up or constitute those VOPs or national evaluation organizations, and here I can speak to a couple of definitions that I don't know whether we can subscribe to all of them or one of them or two of them. One of which would say that the associations, the VOPs, are associations of professional practitioners to advance the profession. I mean, that's a huge undertaking that cannot be basically by on a voluntary basis. Another definition would introduce the term of being a platform for advocacy. A third, innovation, playing the role of innovation intermediaries. A fifth or a fourth, probably, brokers of knowledge between supply and demand, etc. But it seems that we're bound by this straitjacket of VOPE, and I think it's to a large extent it's bounding. And I've been into discussions with a lot of leaders of the VOPs, and the intrinsic nature of the V basically seems to be a lot of hampering their progress and moving forward. So probably the membership might be a question. Are we a bunch of evaluation practitioners and monitoring practitioners, or are we a platform that engage a lot of people around the table being members of those associations? I mean, there is no right and wrong answer, obviously, but I mean, it's a choice. It's a choice that speaks to our mandate, that speaks to our mission, that speaks to our vision. The third is again the mandate, and probably I'm here bound between or torn between a mandate to advance the profession, where we've been into a lot of discussion of the last 5-10 years around the professionalization of the trade. I mean, is it professionalization when almost half or more than half of the membership are not practitioner in the first place? I don't know. Obviously, it might have implications positive, but definitely that wouldn't help moving forward with that claim of being a professional association that would set the boundaries or probably the territorials of the trade. Versus intermediate knowledge brokers. Well, that's a fancy term, that's a fancy role, and would love to hear so. Convening power, do we have that power? Probably not, but we leverage a lot on our partners for us to convene, to have this power. And basically our crowd here is a typical example of our leverage on those partners for us to convene among other stakeholders. So a meaningful degree of advocacy, political influence versus defining and scoping how to advance those the professional boundaries might be another opportunity to consider in our reflection to what we stand as organizations and as key players, as we claim, in pushing forward the national evaluation systems to be resilient in the next probably 7 years to the Agenda 2030. And probably I'll take this opportunity to say that we're leveraging a lot on those circumstances to push for the government to take much more action into in recognizing the use of evaluations. And guess what? A couple of those member states and countries have taken have taken it forward, and there is a serious discussions around calling for a new resolutions for recommitting to the evaluation of the Agenda 2030 that we are working along with member states and partners to move it forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Qasim. I would like to thank all panelists. And really, the civil society and civil society organization can play really a great role when the government is not able to keep with the challenges like it happened in Ukraine. The first emergency response came from civil society organizations and volunteers in Ukraine. And even now people buy some military equipment and help just, yeah. Now I would like to give a floor to audience. Any questions, please? I would like to take 1 to 3 questions, and then maybe round of answers. Yes, Diana, please. Diana from Serbia.
Hello, yeah.
Please introduce yourself.
You seem to know, yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Diana Kozmic, coming from Serbia, representing here the civil society organization, being the business organization. Serbian Association of Employers. Finally, was the panel where we talk on equal footing. I'm sorry, I'm here for the first time. This is the 7th conference. I didn't know these conferences even exist, let alone that the government is doing some monitoring and evaluation, not asking the audience where each and every one of us is affected by those policies, laws, programs, measures which are adopted by the government and reflecting on us. What do we think, how we do feel about them? Now, I first wanted to ask only Georgi, but actually I would like to ask all the panelists. Coming from business, some of you mentioned, I believe it was Professor, the participation of the business as real sector, as private sector in whole this process. To elaborate just a little bit about a question why I'm asking that, we in Serbia as a business association are members of certain monitoring and evaluation aspects, processes, parts, etc. But dealing with the social dialogue, social economic policies, there are so many different aspects that affect business and environment in which it operates. So it is very difficult to single out as non-interesting for business any policy. So being able to participate in just few of them, not on a constant basis, now, then in 2 years again, in the meantime, no, or just on this part, etc. Where do you see good sides and what is really good in having business involved, really? And where do you see space for improvement of participation of any organization? I do agree with the professor that some do not have enough capacities to follow that, either because they are not informed well or do not have simply enough people. Any problem or any good point you would like to put, just one, the most important one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One more question, please. And then we answer.
Merci. Je voudrais remercier les panélistes pour la qualité de leurs interventions. Je voudrais juste savoir, au niveau de la société civile, nous savons qu'on a le gouvernement, on a le pouvoir législatif, ensuite on a le pouvoir judiciaire. La société civile se présente un peu comme le 4e pouvoir. Comment, par exemple, se fait, je dirais, la saisie du gouvernement quand une évaluation est faite au niveau de la société civile, et surtout, comment la société civile présente les recommandations, par exemple, d'une évaluation. Et je voudrais également que nos panélistes nous partagent s'il y a eu des cas où des évaluations ont été faites, des recommandations issues de ces évaluations-là, comment le gouvernement, par exemple, a été saisi, et puis est-ce qu'il y a eu je dirais, des cas où le gouvernement a pris en compte ces différentes recommandations faites par la société civile. Merci.
Okay, one more question, and then I would like to ask panelists to answer.
Thank you, Peter. This is one of the sections that I've been looking for since the conference started, a session that discusses the civil society, because I'm from there. I'm so interested in the discussion from the madam. I would actually like to know what evaluation system establishment in the country is the sole responsibility of government alone, or it has to do in collaboration with civil society. That's one. The other side is if you have a civil society, if you have a government that doesn't have the capacity or full capacity to carry on evaluation of its program, and civil society, along with development partners, take on an initiative to evaluate a particular program, and when you give policy brief to government, how is it, how are you going to get a buy in your government to really look at the findings? I'll give you an example. The Liberian government has a program on, we call Social Development Fund. for a county that was established for citizens. But the citizen begin to complain about the management of that fund. So the civil society organization of Liberia, along with USAID, carry on nationwide evaluation of that program. And based on our program, based on the finding, we recommended some policy changes. And the law was, the lower house acted new law to have a standalone law in management of that, because the finding stated that citizens didn't have control. The whole funding was controlled by lawmakers. So the lower house tried to add a button. There are two levels. The upper house, the law couldn't pass at the upper house. It became more difficult to even get government buy-in into changing the law. So my point is, how can you really get government buy-in when evaluation initiatives are being established by civil society to recommend the government? Where is the entry point to really get it done? Thank you.
I would like to ask also to introduce yourself, because I don't know yet everybody by by name. One moment, I would like to give the chance to answer, then we will have second round of questions. Please note your questions. Now I would like to give the chance to answer to panelists. Who will start? Georgie?
I can start, and the first question was mainly addressed to me, so I'll be happy to respond to that. Well, I was looking forward to having this question, because it's very relevant and timely. The role of business sector in this process, actually, the private sector has a very important role. And first of all, this is you asked about just one example. I can give several. Currently, we work on the public-private dialogue process, and namely, it's focused on the drafting of legislation, the process of dialogue during the drafting process of different pieces of legislation, and the private sector in this regards is the main partner. So we do PPD, and we also do the regulatory impact assessments. And as private sector is one of the major stakeholders, as well as the beneficiaries of different drafts of legislation or amendments in the legislation, we work with the with private companies, especially those who are focused on the particular directions, especially the tech directions, for instance. Telecommunications companies, banks, business associations, different ones like bank associations, etc., different foreign business association like US Chamber of Commerce, etc., European Chamber of Commerce. So they are involved in the process of this dialogue. The second example would be the data that is generated by the private companies and by the private sector, especially the technologies companies. Open data, which can be gathered much better than by the government entities. So their role in this regard is very important. So during the evaluation, the business associations should be also involved in the process, and the information they have regarding the assessments of the government can be very well used. So business sector is the same way important in the process as the civil society, academia, and others. So considering information and considering them as the major stakeholders and the final beneficiaries.
So I mean, I think you've covered that well. And I'm just going to probably talk to this question about government and recommendations from civil society organization. And there's two parts to my response. The first one is that, when we're thinking about kind of collaboration, partnership, we have to remember that this also happens where governments are also politically open to debate and to learning and stuff. And sometimes the civic space is not so open, it's narrowed, and it can be difficult to engage with the state. The second part to that question is that at the same time also, none of us here, if somebody came to you and said, listen, I've been watching you and I've assessed how you're raising your kids, and I have some advice to you, are going to listen to that person. Unless we have a relationship with that person, we're just not going to listen to them because we don't know them. I don't trust your motive. Why are you giving me this advice? I didn't ask for it. And so it's the same thing in that relationship with government. We have to invest in building relationships over a period of time. And what that does is that it creates the condition to say, well, when we want to share something, then I trust your motives. I trust that you want to tell me something for a reason. But also, if we are asking that question at the end of a project, it probably is a bit too late, because we have to think about the use and the influence we want to have at the beginning of the project. And then that will tell us what the stakeholders we need to be engaging with from the beginning and building those relationships and stuff. And I want to give an example of what the evaluation fund, the Global Evaluation Fund, has been doing. And they work in violence prevention. And what they've been doing is that when they're funding evaluations, even if it's programs that are donor funded, they're saying you must know who are the people you want to influence, who are the government ministries that are working on this issue. Talk to them before you even put a funding proposal for an evaluation, and also kind of find out where are they in the process, what's going on within government, where are they in terms of their policy debates on the issue, because sometimes we come with evidence which that's not where they are. And if just going back to the comment that I made in the beginning, that if you think about evaluations or even the NES as a knowledge brokering tool, as an instrument to help people solve problems, unless we know the problems they're trying to solve, we can't give them the evidence to solve those problems because we don't know what they're trying to address. So that would be my comment on that question.
OK, merci. Je pense que la question de la participation du secteur privé est importante, parce que s'il a dit que no must be left behind, c'est-à-dire tout le monde compte, c'est aussi bien au niveau des bénéficiaires qu'au niveau de tous les acteurs. Donc, le secteur privé est un maillon très, très important, parce que le secteur privé est à la fois un producteur de données, mais c'est aussi un utilisateur de données. Donc, pour ces deux rôles-là, on ne peut pas laisser le secteur privé de côté, il faut pouvoir compter sur ce secteur-là. Ensuite, pour ce qui est de comment est-ce qu'il faut saisir le gouvernement dans le cadre des recommandations, il faut comprendre dans un premier temps que la société civile ne peut pas s'ériger en administration. La société civile accompagne. La société civile peut décrier des situations à partir d'évaluations, mais la société civile ne peut pas prendre le devant. À défaut, la société civile peut tout simplement participer à la promotion des bonnes pratiques à travers des débats citoyens, à travers d'autres actions d'information, parce que c'est la conscience, c'est l'éveil des populations, mais ça ne veut pas dire cela qu'il faut éveiller les populations au point de troubler l'ordre public qui existe. Donc, la société civile est un maillon important, mais vraiment d'accompagnement dans le processus. Pour ce qui est du rôle de la société civile dans l'évaluation de politiques publiques, il faut dire que la société civile a simplement trois rôles à jouer, c'est-à-dire, dans un premier temps, en tant qu'acteur du système, la société civile travaille avec trois entités clés, c'est-à-dire les ministères qui portent la dynamique de l'évaluation dans le pays en question. Tout dépend de l'ancrage institutionnel qui existe. Les institutions consultatives et de contrôle et les administrations, le deuxième élément. Le troisième, ce sont les autres associations d'évaluation qui existent, parce que Kassim l'a dit tout à l'heure, c'est un environnement qui souvent peut être troublé par d'autres acteurs, mais leur rôle, c'est de faire de telle sorte qu'il y ait une communauté d'évaluateurs, mais qui soit un vivier qui peut être consulté aussi bien par le premier acteur que le second et le troisième. Au niveau du premier acteur, c'est-à-dire les ministères et tout, qui pilotent la politique évaluative, le rôle de la société civile est tout simplement de mettre à leur disposition un vivier d'experts et dans lequel il peut puiser pour accompagner certaines évaluations, pour accompagner la lecture de certains documents pour lesquels d'autres experts ont été utilisés, et puis pour participer à la validation des documents de stratégie. C'est pareil pour les institutions de contrôle et autres, c'est-à-dire l'Assemblée nationale, par exemple. Et je prends le cas de mon pays, où la société civile a fait le renforcement des capacités des parlementaires sur l'évaluation des politiques publiques sensibles aux gens. Là, c'est le réseau national d'évaluation qui l'a fait en premier. Et ça a été plusieurs sessions, mais c'était un financement de la BAD, par exemple, en son temps. C'est pour ça que j'ai dit que les PTF sont assez importants parce qu'ils peuvent intervenir aussi bien à travers l'administration, mais que à travers aussi la société civile. C'est pareil pour récemment, les sénateurs aussi ont été formés par le réseau va sur l'évaluation encore et sur l'action, sur l'évaluation des politiques publiques, parce que c'est une nouvelle entité, mais ces personnes ont besoin d'être formées pour mieux être outillées et vraiment accompagner l'effort de l'État aussi bien au niveau de la cour haute que de la cour basse. Merci bien.
No. George, you want to add something? Yes.
I want to respond to the second question about the recommendation that we are picked up by the government from the civil society. There are different and multiple platforms. We are all stakeholders. These are the multi-stakeholder platforms, including, if you are aware about the Open Government Partnership, for instance, and SDGs, and Mamadou quite well overviewed this topic, like the recommendation, the goal 17 about the partnership. So these multi-stakeholder partnerships are crucial, and these are the platforms where civil society, private sector, academia are involved, and the recommendations, I can give you example of Georgia, whatever was achieved and quite successfully achieved in the frames of OGP, the Open Government Partnership, was coming from civil society recommendations. Those reforms in the different sectors, public service delivery, increasing accountability and public participation, transparency, opening governments. These are the key recommendations that civil society and different stakeholders, among them the private entities, had. So we can consider this partnership as the key to the successful implementation of reform. So leaving no one behind. This is the principle of SDGs, and we should never forget this.
I would like to have next round of questions. There was one question there. No, 1, 2. People raised. There are 2 people from previous. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I didn't get, where is
1. Yes, please. No, because people were raising their hand in the previous round, just we postponed it. Please introduce yourself and ask question.
My name is Aziz Iskakov. I am from Kazakhstan, and I want to ask just one question. Often the existence of civil society could be simulated by authoritarian regimes, or maybe some kinds of special security services also. So how risky do you think Gongo's activities may be in a sphere of evaluation? Thanks.
Gone.
Governmental semi-NGO. Yes.
Ah, okay. Second question.
Monsieur Suleiman de Djibouti, je salue tout le monde. Je remercie également les pénalistes pour la qualité de leur intervention. Donc, il existe dans chaque pays une association en charge de l'évaluation. Donc, le niveau des associations diffère d'un pays à l'autre. Donc, je voudrais adresser ma question à Monsieur Mamadou Koulibaly. Donc, comment ils ont commencé la création de leur association en chargé de l'évaluation et quelles sont les difficultés auxquelles ils sont rencontrés. Donc, c'est un cas où on peut s'en inspirer. Je vous remercie.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much, panelists. My name is Jorge Chavez Tafur. I work with Oxfam. I wanted to ask you your views on an issue. You've already mentioned a bit on trust, but the idea of representativeness and legitimacy of civil society organizations. One of the criticisms that we receive often is that we are not elected. No, we are just a group of professionals who like these issues and who therefore work. But do we really represent the population? Do we really represent the beneficiaries of projects or so? What should we do if we want to play a big role in these systems that you have presented? Should we, or everybody, should we, also the government, do something to ensure this representativeness and ensure these legitimacy issues? Thanks.
And fourth question, please.
Thank you. Andy Rowe from Canada, fellow and former president of the Canadian Evaluation Society, but I can't speak for the Canadian Evaluation Society. I'm not authorized. I think we're being a bit cavalier with the concept of civil society. It's not homogeneous.
Yes.
And you're talking about civil society on social issues, primarily, people, representing other underrepresented people. But really, civil society is much broader than that. For example, obviously, it includes environmental interests, people representing nature, people working in terms of promoting environmental justice, etc. So some of us take the position that we want all interests, representatives of all interests, who can affect the success of the intervention, and all interests who are affected by the intervention. And there is no intervention that does not reach into natural systems and sustainability, or no intervention from human side, or vice versa. So we have the entire representation there from private interests who might be more extractive of human and natural resources, all the way through environment. People are representing segments of the population, particularly around gender and children. And in Canada in particular, Indigenous people and First Nations, who by 8 successive rulings of the Supreme Court have equal status to the Government of Canada in decision-making. And our approach of many of us now is not to engage these organizations at the tail end, but to get them up to the decision table on the design, the questions that evaluation asks, the methods it will use to help us engage responses, get appropriate respondents, and then in the processing of the results so that they view the data and process the results. And what this ends up with is evaluations that are, first of all, more timely, because they're aware of when there are decision opportunities, addressing questions that are relevant to the whole spectrum in a way that represents the interests, the combined interests of everyone. And I think this is very much associated with evaluation use. So I want to ask the panelists, what are the prospects of moving a broader concept of civil society to the decision table about the evaluation?
Any more questions? Because this is our last round probably of questions, because we will be run out of time. No more questions. Okay. I think that probably civil society groups and evaluators and the governments can co-design and co-create policy decisions and evaluation system. Who would like to answer first? Maybe Kasim, because he was not speaking yet.
Yeah, I think the
different questions definitely are challenging and not easy to answer. A couple of observations, a couple of notes. One is there is no size, there is no way that we can address the question of civil society, with one answer. It's always context specific. In the case of context whereby regimes are a bit autocratic or theocratic or probably what have you, I mean, there would be, you should think of different ways of engaging. And different, even civil society within such within any context, it's a different level of intervention. Some of them are activists, some of them are advocacy, some of them are service providers, some of them are professionals. So it depends on the context that you can maneuver around. And the idea is for you to have the leverage to present the case and to convey the message to the right people in the right way at the right time, and always to hit at the right time. So there is no clear-cut answer. I think I admire the idea of having the national evaluation associations or organizations to play the role of probably convening those interests of different society. I mean, that would be brilliant. And if that would be on the agenda of the National Evaluation Organization of OPES, I mean, that would be a brilliant idea rather than claiming a representation, which is not. But at the same time, that would require a lot of building trust and credibility. And it's a thin line between claiming and walking the talk. So claiming would require that we do have the sets of skills, the sets of competencies, sets of professional competencies that would make us in that position, and having the different tools of brokerage of playing the intermediary and the facilitation to bring those different civil society views to the table, not for consultations by all means, but for scoping probably the evaluations, and most importantly, again, for the use of the evaluation. Legitimacy is by all means a critical. I mean, we've lived in eras, especially in the 2010, with the different revolutions that took place, and I think the question of those being triggered by civil society that represents is always there. I mean, we all have different hats, and sometimes we use different chapeaus and different hats in different contexts. And I think when some of us were in the streets wearing the activist hat, are ending up in probably in saloons discussions discussions and dialogue with stakeholders and government stakeholders, it would require a mix of all of those set of skills, and we cannot just rely on one of them. That's probably my take, and I would love to pick up on the ideas of OPES playing that role, definitely.
Yeah, I would like to give a floor to other speakers, and also to do some final, like answering questions, and also doing some final messages or final remarks.
Okay. Merci. Je pense qu'il y a une question qui m'a été adressée de façon directe. Il s'agit de savoir comment est-ce que nous faisons dans notre environnement, dans notre système, dans notre écosystème évaluatif au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire. Et il faut dire que le RIS est né d'une idée d'experts en matière d'évaluation en 2005. Voilà, donc c'est un réseau apolitique et non gouvernemental et à but non lucratif. Donc c'est du volontariat. Et ce réseau-là, il faut dire que c'est un réseau de plaidoyer, à la fois des plaidoyers, mais aussi un réseau qui est un vivier d'experts qui peuvent aussi se prononcer sur certains documents techniques lorsqu'ils sont invités à travailler avec les institutions et les ministères de tutelle. Et aussi, il faut dire que nous ne travaillons pas sans difficulté. Oui, les difficultés sont énormes parce que nous formons beaucoup, et avec très peu de moyens. Souvent, ce sont nos cotisations. Et il y a des partenaires de développement qui nous appuient pour des renforcements de capacité. On a l'UNICEF, on a le PNUD qui est là représenté par M. Adrien. On a la BAD que j'ai cité tout à l'heure. On a même la Banque mondiale, voilà, et avec plein d'autres partenaires qui nous écoutent, qui prennent en compte les thèmes de référence que nous leur envoyons pour le renforcement des capacités des acteurs, aussi bien de la société civile, mais parfois aussi de l'administration et des institutions. Ensuite, il faut dire aussi que le conflit ne manque pas, hein, lorsque l'environnement devient saturé. Souvent, il y a des conflits d'intérêts qui font que nous sommes obligés à un moment donné de s'asseoir et puis regarder dans la même direction, mais cela part des discussions que nous avons. Il faut dire aussi qu'au niveau du risque, il y a des actions fortes. Ce qui nous a permis de résister à la tempête, c'est qu'on a mis en place un secrétariat permanent qui est une personne qui a décidé volontairement de se sacrifier corps et âme, parce que c'est ce qu'il faut. Sinon, la structure naît, mais tant qu'à un moment donné, on ne sent pas de motivation, chacun va où il veut, et puis après, la société n'a plus cette force qu'elle avait à sa naissance. Donc, le secrétariat permanent, il faut du volontariat vraiment pour pouvoir accompagner. Ensuite, au niveau des actions, il y a les accompagnements à tous les niveaux, je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, au niveau de l'administration publique, au niveau de l'Assemblée, au niveau du Sénat, à tous les niveaux, la structure, lorsqu'elle est sollicitée, elle vraiment répond et positivement pour pouvoir appuyer ces acteurs-là, avec soit ses propres moyens ou bien l'accompagnement des partenaires au développement. Au niveau des documents nationaux d'évaluation, la structure aussi intervient parce que lorsqu'elle est sollicitée, il y a le PND, il y a le DSRP en son temps, et il y a les EMD, il y a les ODD, voilà, tous ces aspects-là. Le réseau est sollicité en tant que réseau d'experts pour la formulation d'indicateurs et plein d'autres choses. Même les actions peuvent être révisées parce qu'une action mal formulée ne peut pas donner lieu à un bon indicateur évaluable. Ensuite, au niveau de l'introduction des curricula, oui, nous avons aussi appuyé plusieurs structures comme les universités hautes à faciliter l'introduction de l'évaluation dans les curricula de formation dans le cadre de la professionnalisation. Aujourd'hui, les universités, les grandes écoles, pour la plupart, et même l'école d'administration, tous ceux-là sont aujourd'hui engagés. Il y a des cours qui sont donnés à ceux qui sortent de ces écoles-là. Donc, ces personnes-là sortent déjà vraiment expérimentées, ce qui n'était pas le cas auparavant. Et au niveau des études, il faut dire aussi que dans le cas de la COVID, nous ne sommes pas restés les bras croisés. On a conduit 3 études dans le cadre de la pandémie avec l'UNICEF. Une première étude qui est une étude recherche, action, développement qui a porté sur la conséquence de la COVID sur les enfants et les femmes. Une seconde étude qui a porté sur la conséquence de la COVID sur les services sociaux de base et les ménages. Une troisième étude qui était l'étude qualitative track que nous avons conduite. Et aujourd'hui, je pense que la Côte d'Ivoire s'en sert bien pour le développement sur lequel il est lancé. Merci bien.
Thank you, Mamadou. Sorry for keeping you still here, but I would like to hear also to other panelists with their answers and final remarks, and then I think we will deserve a coffee.
So, I
Please,
mean,
Matudi and
my response
Jonathan.
to Oxfam, and we can talk about it after because we run out of time now, but it was probably going to be in the same line as what Eri said around, I mean, not all civil society organizations are the same, but at the same time, I do think that there is no relationship with no conflict with that is unproblematic. And the same goes even in CSO and government. There's always issues that needs to be sorted out, and legitimacy and trust have to be built, and they're very fragile. And I think my last comment is just also that we're talking about representation, we're talking about participation, but in reality, not all organizations can participate and be part of a process. Some will not have interest. I mean, just in one sector. Well, when we did the last kind of census of like NGOs in South Africa, for example, and that's like different types, not taking your point about being cavaliers with terms, but there were like 250,000 NGOs. 150,000 of those work in the social sector alone. There is no way that all of them can participate in a process, right? But there might be some that have an interest. I think what's important is to have that principle of wanting to open up the democratic space and open up the space for engagement and dialogue. That's the principle that we need to keep. Thank you.
I wanted to respond to the question from the gentleman from Kazakhstan about the Congos, especially in the countries of authoritarian regimes or the semi-authoritarian regimes. This is an issue, and it's quite a problematic issue because governments in countries like those try to discredit credible non-governmental organizations and bringing their NGOs. This is a problem, but at the same time, we as civil society organization, professional NGOs, and Kasim quite well defined the variety of civil society organizations. These must be advocacy organizations, activists, service providers, etc. So those who are professional NGOs should reflect the needs that is in the society. And the question about the different and quite a broad NGO sector, how they should address those needs that exist for the final beneficiaries. Yes, we must, it might be the umbrella organizations or those who are quite popular in the society. Those organizations should be quite active in delivering those of the messages that exist in the society. So yes, gongos are problematic, but at the same time, we should work as we do. And when we speak about the legitimacy of civil society organizations, this legitimacy comes from their professionalism. I can speak about the organizations who do the different type of consultancy work, research, and with their professionalism, they can have their space in the decision-making process. We are not the decision makers. Decision makers are those in the government, but we can influence the process of decision-making with our professionalism. So in case we are neglected, in case we are left alone and our recommendations are not accepted, then we can do the advocacy, we can become the activists and mobilize society to have our recommendations advocated. So this quite a long process. I've been in this sector for 15 years already, and we started the organization just 2 individuals, and now it's one of the most influential civil society organizations because with our professionalism in different sectors, we started with opening the archives, and now we have the 8 major directions, including social economic direction, media freedom, rule of law and human rights, social economic direction, tech and internet innovation. So you should bring the professionals. It's quite hard to compete with the private sector, but I mean, to bringing the professionals, you cannot pay as much as the private companies might. But at the same time, there is a different motivation. You work independently, you work for the people. So to be in the civil society is quite pleasant because you feel what you are doing. You feel like you see what you are achieving. You see the success that you have. So and you are bringing a very good positive results in working with different stakeholders, especially like governments can use that expertise that exists in civil society. And in my presentation, I want to leave this key message that don't leave the different stakeholders. Government should pick up that very important and valuable work that exists in these sectors and use this cooperation to achieve the results and do the reforms. So thank you very much once again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. I think that we can continue our discussion with the cup of coffee. If you have more questions, we are open to talk to you during coffee break. The next panel will begin in 3:45, as I understand. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for panelists.